Welcome everyone. It's exactly 3 o'clock, if I'm right. Welcome to the second webinar in the Interreg North Sea Region SEEV4-City series. I will shortly start with the introduction of this webinar with practical arrangements. So this webinar is recorded. There is a Q&A possible. Please post your questions in that Q&A. These questions can be upvoted, so the most popular questions will be handled. We limit this Q&A each time in time or into questions. We also do some polls to know a bit more about our attendees or participants. This is of course anonymous. And afterwards we will share these presentations as well the video to all registered participants. So there is a small disclaimer that all information that is shared in this webinar, findings, publications, will not necessarily represent the views or policies of the Interreg North Sea region, the SEEV4-City partners, or its individual participants. So, small introduction for those who have missed the previous webinar of SEEV4-City. The start of SEEV4-City has been found about 5 years ago. The project itself is officially running 3.5 years, and the principal idea is to create a project about sustainable energy for EVs in a city environment. The biggest principle you see here, we have a morning peak and a big evening peak in the grid demand, and the goal is to flatten the curve with smart charging or vehicle to grid. We have 6 operational pilots running in the SEEV4-City project. You find more information in the previous webinar or on the website. We will speak about a few ones more today. They're all up and running, and we're gonna soon also share the findings and results of these projects, as well the policy recommendations in the next webinar. The objectives of this project, the key performance indicators were of course the most important: CO2 emissions reductions, energy autonomy, and to avoid major grid investments. So I think we can go from this to one of our first speakers. This is on our agenda. We have the short introduction. We're going to talk today especially about vehicle to grid projects around the world. So we not only share the information about SEEV4-City, but we also are very curious what's going on further on. We have very nice speakers from far and short away. After that, we will see if there is still time for a short question and answer session. Please post them in the Q&A box. So, well, we start with our first speaker, Ghanim. Welcome. Thank you. To introduce, we are a bit curious about our attendees. And we start with the first question. Ghanim, I will first ask where our attendees are coming from. So, I hope you can all see it. Please start to vote and let know where you're coming from. We especially took this time in the afternoon so that people from North America or America in general and Asia also could join. And I can see that this is also the case. So happy to see this. We're almost there in the voting. Gonna soon close it off. Yeah, and we see indeed that most of our people are coming from Europe. We have a big presence of America, indeed, Asia, and even Africa. So very good. I will share you the results of this. And there you can see where everybody is coming from. So, Ghanim, we go to our next question, and this is an introduction. What you wanted to know, especially from our participants. What functionalities would you like to have in a smart EV charger? You can choose actually 3 answers.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I expect a very differentiated answer because we have very different origin of attendees, different backgrounds. Some are really EV specialists, some are more energy specialists. And the votes are still coming in. Ghanim, can you want to already share some comments?
If I can see the results.
I will share the results now. We stop.
Yeah, if you want, yeah. Or maybe later.
Yeah, here we go.
Interesting. I think majority are about charging from renewables and fast charging. Interesting. I was hoping for the last 3. But as you said, I think audience are of different backgrounds. So obviously there are people who want to charge quickly, but as you will see from my presentation, I think there are some issues there. But interesting results, I think. And it's nice to see a majority are about charging from renewables, which is great.
Okay, then we can go to the next question. Maybe you can explain a bit about your question and the background of it.
Yeah, I think in the literature, if we look about the cost of battery degradation, they give different figures. They varies from as low as 3 cents per kilowatt hour exchanged to about 30 cents per kilowatt hour exchange. So I just wanted to hear about the audience view. I know some of you are working in this area also, and where do you think the figure is? Is it towards the 3 or is it towards the 30?
See, they're still coming in.
Or in between.
Yeah. I have the impression that people are more hesitating in this case because it goes a bit slower. So people don't wait too long. Make your first guess. That's always the best one.
Yeah.
We'll start to close off from here. Thank you for your contribution already, and we'll share the results.
Yeah, I think majority are on the low side, which is great to hear, but whether this is the true all the time, I have a big question mark here, because this depends on many factors, and sometimes we might fall into the 13 or even the high side, depending on the operating conditions. I'll explain a little bit more in the presentation.
Okay, that's good.
Great, thank you.
Then we have the last question that you wanted to share. Here it comes. Do you want to share some more information around this question, or is it?
Well, yeah, I think this webinar is about smart charging and V2G. And obviously V2G comes with extra cost. So I just wanted to see what the view is of the audience about the extra cost, whether it is worth it, or we better stick to smart charging.
People are more aware of this answer. I have the feeling that it goes much faster. So closing off from here, and I will share the results on the screen. It's light winner,
so,
yes.
There is benefit there, obviously, and I'll explain again in my presentation where the benefits are. We will get there, I think. I think those with 43% are probably aware of the development going on, and we are not there yet, but I think we are heading in that direction. And I suspect both probably smart charging and V2G will be, you know, valuable solutions in the future.
Okay, good. Then we can go actually to your presentation.
Yeah.
So please take over the screen.
Yeah. I cannot say. You cannot start screen share while the other participant sharing.
I will do it. Here we go.
Yeah. Right. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, indeed.
So, yeah. So my name is Ghanim Putrus. I'm from Northumbria University in Newcastle, UK. And wanted to share with you some of my experience, I think, with SEEV4-City project and EV4 energy services. I lead one of the work packages in SEEV4-City project, and we have done some really useful work there that I would like to share with you. Oops. So just to I'll give you an overview first, and then we'll look into the the smart charging and V2G, and this is the reason for the question I shared with you, and then look into some of the work we have done here at Northumbria. So moving to, if I can, yeah. I think first I need to start by really agreeing on the definition. We see a lot of definitions in the literature in the business, V2H, V2B, smart charging, uncontrolled charging, dumb charging. So what do we mean by this? I think Philip gave very good introduction, and these slides that we use. Thanks Hugo for developing these. And if we look at the right-hand side of the slide to the top, this is uncontrolled charging, and apologies if you have seen this many times before, but really demonstrate what can happen if we have no control at all on charging. And many of the chargers at home or on the street these days, they are of this type, and there was a lot of concern that people might get home, put the car on charge, and then we already have a peak, which is the blue, bluish color here, the curve, which is the demand in the house. We already have peak in the evening, and then the electric vehicle charging will push this peak even higher and cause problems for the grid. So smart charging is really about moving this additional demand on the grid from the peak here to where PV generation is, for example, the sun is shining, or during off-peak periods, and therefore relieve the grid from this additional demand. In addition, smart charging also allows controlled charging to change the rate of charge, and therefore this can provide useful support for the grid with regard to frequency regulation. We can use what's called firm frequency response, or that's in UK, frequency containment reserve, I think in Europe, to support the grid, which is valuable service smart charging can provide. If we move into V2G, then actually what we are doing, we are trying to reduce this peak by what's called peak shaving. We charge the vehicles during the day, for example, from renewable energy, or during off-peak times, and then the energy stored in the battery, we use some of it to shave this peak here. What I'm trying to get to is vehicle for energy service, or EV4ES, really is about both of them, smart charging and V2X in general, we call it, which is V2H or V2G. And EV4ES really is more about trying to integrate these three systems. We have electric transport, electricity grid, renewable energy. At the moment, they are not well integrated. And if we can integrate these better, we can get green energy and transport systems. So it is a sustainable system that we can rely on for the future. Now, if I move to the next slide, and again, I'm going to repeat a little bit here, so apologies. But I think what I want to say here is that SEEV4-City project is really about this integration of renewable energy, transport system, and electricity grid. And this is in the objective to demonstrate smart energy and electric mobility solutions. To me, from beginning, this is the story of SEEV4-City. We need to get into sustainable green energy and transport systems. And I think what's more interesting also for me in this project is we have 6 operational pilots, different sizes, from a small house in Loughborough here in the UK to a big city, Amsterdam city. And different services these are providing, different boundaries they have, different complexity. So really they are providing us with excellent real life data that we can analyze. We call this living labs, and for academics, this is heaven, really, a lot better than simulation. So the small size house here We learned from it a lot in the first couple of years, and then Cenex, I think, managed to upgrade this into building another trial in Burton-on-Trent to try to now experiment with V2G. So lessons learned there were used in the Burton-on-Trent pilot. And we have other pilots, Leicester, which is using vehicle to building, and we have a car park in Oslo using smart charging or peak shaving also. And we have Kortrijk, and then the very interesting pilot in Amsterdam Arena, where they are using second life batteries, and they started, I think, deploying now V2G chargers to do frequency regulations. Very successful project. And then the other one in Amsterdam City, where they are experimenting with smart charging. I think we need to understand the difference between the two, and what do we want from a smart charger? Existing chargers are not really that smart. They are, most of them, uncontrolled, and even those that are smart chargers, the smartness is not used for its full potential, just time of use tariff or something very basic. Smart chargers ideally should be, well, first to meet user requirements, and second, need to charge just enough energy. We don't need to charge the battery more than enough, because when the battery is operating close to the maximum limit, battery degradation is higher. So if we can keep this lower, it's better for the vehicle. And if we don't need full charge, why do we full charge it? We only charge what we need. And if we are going to support the grid using V2G, then obviously we need to allow for this. And as all of you agreed, we need to charge from renewable energy. Otherwise, it is not a green transport. And also, if it is local renewable energy, even better. And then I think most important for the smart charger is to deal with the EV as a dynamic load. And this is where smart charging comes in. It is dynamic load. We modulate this load to fit with the grid, for example, requirements. And with V2G, we deal with the EV as energy storage. So we have now bigger range, either charging or discharging, to support the grid, to deal with the intermittent nature of renewable generation. So there are many benefits there. And I think for me, more important is also that we do all these functions without affecting the battery life, or with the minimum effect. I think we cannot probably not cause any effects, but we need to minimize this effect on the battery life. As an EV owner, I don't want to lose more through the degradation than what I'm gaining from supporting the grid. One last point here is we need to recognize that V2G requires bidirectional chargers. And obviously this will be associated with complex control, ICT, and some issues with interoperability. If I can change the slide now, yeah. One of the work we did in this research, and we had a very good PhD student supported by this SEEV4-City project. He did excellent analysis. We have different stakeholders here when we deal with EV for energy services. And these stakeholders, there are many of them, and they have different and conflicting interests. Obviously, the work we did, we tried to simplify it. We looked into the house only, but this has to go higher level, whether it is distribution level or transmission level, and stakeholders increases and complexity increases. But the PhD student focused on a small house with 4 main stakeholders: the energy user or the house owner, and then we have got the EV owner, who may be the home or the house owner also, or could be different, and then we have the system operator, whether it's DSO or TSO, and then we've got the policy, the environment to look after. And this optimization, he did a great algorithm he developed to try to optimize this, how we can manage these together to try to make them all win from providing the different services within EV for energy services. And as you would expect, it will be multi-dimensional problems. So there is no ideal solution that will maximize the benefit for everyone, but there must be a compromise to reach here. And some of the results we obtained are very interesting. I would like to share with you the table here. As you can see, we have got the attributes here, the 4 stakeholders, and we have got the percentage benefits, the maximum we can get, each one of them can get from smart charging as compared to uncontrolled charging, and the benefits from V2G as compared to uncontrolled charging. So for the end user, you can see that smart charging provide benefit, 37% benefits maximum, whilst V2G provide more, obviously because you are using the vehicle here, charging and discharging, so you have more range and therefore you can provide more service and you get better benefit. However, this better benefit can affect the battery degradation, and therefore the benefit for the EV owner is not as good as smart charging. For the grid, we simulated this based on FFR only, that's firm frequency response, and therefore the benefits are the same. But if you include peak shaving, V2G will become better. For the environment was similar. So these are the maximum, the up to, if you like, benefits you can get. So if we try to find a compromise, then maybe the grid operator must reduce this. For example, you have given here to 42%. And therefore, these guys here, the end user or the owner, can get some benefits, may not be as good as they expected, the maximum. So they are going to lose, say, for example, here, 27%, 10%. So the supplier may probably decide, well, okay, I will give you 10% each extra so that to encourage you to come, I'll still make 20% profit. So there is some compromise here to be made, but it is doable, and then everybody is happy. Win-win situation, as they say. Here is a slide also just to look into the battery degradation, and you mentioned the 3 cent or 30 cent. Really, if you look in the literature, you get all this range from very small to very large, and then you get the optimistic and the pessimistic. And the operating conditions does affect this figure a lot. In addition, obviously, to the chemistry, structure, thermal management, all these factors affect battery degradation. And we did some analysis here, 3 cases. One is uncontrolled charging, the graph to the right. And the other one is controlled charging, smart charging, and the other one is V2G. And here are the results based on lab tests. One of our good PhD students also did lots of lab tests on cells for 15 months. And this is what happens if it is uncontrolled charging. And you can see here V2G and smart charging actually help with reducing battery degradation. So we can get benefits here and everybody is a winner. So if we can control the environment, the operating conditions of the vehicle, we can make this work for everyone. But to do this, we need dynamic model really of battery state of health, because this is changing all the time. Even depends on the history of the use of the battery. But if we have a dynamic model that we can run it in real time, and then I, as an EV owner, can decide whether to participate or not, then that will be great. And just some concluding remarks here. I think with regard to V2X, V2G, at the moment, there is limited choice in the market about the hardware, so you may struggle with these. Cost of battery is important to consider here, but we need to keep in mind that the battery cost is going down and down, so in the future, this will become cheaper and cheaper, and battery degradation will become also less of impact here. But quantifying the impact of EV4-ES on the battery life is important. And we need to keep in mind the interaction between different stakeholders. There are several of them, and these interact, and maybe there could be conflicting interests here. So we need commercially viable business models to try to find the optimum solution that will keep everybody happy. And finally, I think if we want to have a successful business models, we need to have clear definition of the roles. We have to have the right infrastructure in place, and most important also, we have to have the right policies. And this will be the subject of next webinar, I think, to try to define the benefits and obligation of all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghanim. Very interesting conclusions, of course. We can switch to the Q&A.
Yep.
See, questions are coming up. So, going to take the first question. How are the benefits defined? What's the baseline?
I think the baseline we used in the studies is always uncontrolled charging, as it is now. So when you do smart charging, how does this compare with uncontrolled charging? And then the V2G also, how does it compare with uncontrolled charging or smart charging? And then you can decide which one is better for you. V2G may not always be better for everyone involved. It could be smart charging be better for, under certain conditions.
Okay. I see a few other questions. There are DC chargers adapted to V2G, and there are also some experience with AC. Does it make sense? What system is better? Are the difference in terms of battery degradation? It's two different questions.
I don't think there is a difference here. I think the difference will be how fast you charge a battery. DC chargers usually are fast chargers, and this is what affects battery degradation. I think there are other factors that decide whether to go AC or DC, which, where the weight of the power electronics converters be, whether in the charger itself or in the vehicle. But with regard to battery degradation, it's the rate of charge and other factors, obviously, state of charge, the temperature, and all sorts of things, battery management system that affects the battery degradation. It doesn't matter if it is AC or DC.
Yeah, I'm gonna go for one question more. Compared to the typical state of the EVs, what additional or modified hardware part systems will be needed for smart charging or vehicle to grid?
Well, smart charging, really, you don't need a lot. Current chargers, a lot of them are really smart, but this smartness is not being used because different reasons. And mainly, really, there is no policy or regulations to cover this. But I think V2G is a bit more problematic with regard to the hardware, because you need bidirectional charger. So current chargers will not be suitable. There are some of them with bidirectional capability, but these are purpose-built for this. And also you need more communications between the different stakeholders for V2G. So the infrastructure is a bit more expensive, if you like, for V2G. In my view, smart charging is easier to implement, I think. And we can probably move into this quicker than V2G. But V2G has more advantage, as I explained, and perhaps in the future, we gently move from smart charging to V2G also.
Okay.
But sorry, I also forgot to mention that we do have a report published on the SEEV4-City website. If you are interested to look into the state of the art on this, there is a lot more information in that report.
Of course, there's much more to tell about than we can do in this short 2 hours. There is one last question that I would like to handle, and then we move on. Apart from the practical issues, how would this work with legislation? Is the battery part of the energy network or part of the vehicle? I suppose also that these practical issues and legislation will be handled in the next webinar, where you will talk more about policies.
Yes, yes. Well, the battery is in the car, really. So it depends on the business model. If you are owning the car with the battery, then obviously it's your battery. But when you deal with the smart charging or V2G, really you are giving control of the battery to the other stakeholder. So there is an issue here. But if the car is leased, then obviously somebody else on the battery and maybe somebody else is controlling it. So there are some issues here. And as you rightly said, I think this will be discussed in the next webinar.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ghanim.
Thank you.
We are ready to introduce our next speaker, Pieter. Welcome.
Thank you.
Are we ready to share the screen as well?
Yes, if Ghanim grants me access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I need to.
It should be working now.
All right.
Yes.
Here
we go. Thank you, Philippe. My name is Pieter Bons, and I work for the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And I'd like to present some results and learnings from the Flexpower project, which we did together with the grid operator Leander, charge point operator Vattenfall, and of course the City of Amsterdam and Knowledge Center ELAT NL in the past year approximately. And it's one of the operational pilots in the SEEV4-City project. So why would we want to do smart charging in Amsterdam? Well, Amsterdam is one of the world's leading cities in terms of electric transportation, with tens of thousands of electric vehicles driving around the streets. And Amsterdam also has very ambitious plans to become zero emission by 2030. So that means that this is actually happening right now, and the city has to prepare for the EV contribution to the electricity grids in order to make these plans actually possible. So that's why we started an actual pilot. And what actually did we do? Well, in the top of this slide, you can see the average household electricity demand in the Netherlands. And this looks a little bit like the pictures that we saw in the introduction, apart from the fact that there actually is no morning peak. During the night, we have low energy demand. During the day, we have average energy demand, and then during the evening, we have a peak. And the EV contribution will have a similar shape, because people will plug in their car after they come home in the evening, which would mean that this peak will actually only increase. And that's why we designed the Flexpower profile to be approximately the inverse of the demand profile. So when the demand is low, a lot of current is available for charging on a charging station. And if the demand of other households is large, then the current which is available for the charging is lower. And a small point to make here is that current does not directly, of course, current determines power, but the way current determines power depends on the vehicle characteristics, because there are very different models around on the market. And there's one third difference, and that's actually that we have two profiles for sunny conditions and cloudy conditions. So when there are sunny conditions, there's a little bit extra current available to charge, because there will be higher local solar production, which is made available to the electric vehicles. So this profile was implemented on 450 charging stations in the city of Amsterdam, serving over 20,000 unique users. And these are live as we speak. So what are the goals and challenges of the project? Well, public charging dynamics are very complicated, because there are very different vehicles on the market, and you actually don't have a lot of information. In contrast to, for example, a home charging solution, and there are several smart charging solutions already on the market for home chargers, where you're fully in control. You know exactly what your demand is, you know whether you're going to leave for the night or not. But unfortunately, in the public domain, we don't have this information. Anybody can drive to Amsterdam and plug in their car. We have no idea how long he's going to stay or how much energy this vehicle plans to charge. There's also competition for spaces. So you might have your preferred spot, but if it's occupied, you have to go to another spot. So that means that the predictability is also quite difficult. And there are very different user profiles. So a taxi will behave very differently on the energy market than a commuter, for example. So the goal of this project actually is first to prove the technical feasibility of implementing such a large-scale smart charging strategy under the current conditions in the city, and to measure the real-world impact on the grid, on the users, and on the overlap with local sustainable energy production. And in order to answer these questions, we have two large data sets. The data contains information on all the charging transactions that have taken place in the city of Amsterdam. And we also have some extra detailed information where we get an update on the meter in the charging station every 15 minutes. So we actually have high resolution information on how this charging transaction has actually developed over time. And in order to actually determine the impact of the smart charging strategy, we've selected 450 Flexpower stations, as shown before, but they are compared to 450 reference stations. Because the dynamics are so complex, there are many known but also unknown factors. And by comparing these two groups in a statistical way, we can actually look at the differences, and by this robust experimental design, we don't have to know the exact details of all these unknown factors, because they will be present, equally present in both groups. So first, we have to make sense of the data before we can draw any conclusions. And the first important thing to look at is actually these different vehicle models that are on the market. If you have a plug-in hybrid vehicle with a very small battery, it will be a completely different story than a very advanced full electric vehicle with a very high battery. And as you can see in this graph, where we plot the maximum power that we have found in our data set compared to the maximum total amount of energy, you can see that there are different plateaus in the data. So there's a natural clustering occurring. And this has to do with the technical characteristics of the car. And actually they are determined by two factors: the number of phases that a car can use to charge. So that's basically the number of wires it uses in the station. More wires means more power. And on the other hand, the current which it can use. So a higher current also means a higher power. And there are a number of combinations, and the cells that are filled in correspond to actual models that are available on the market. So we've made this categorization to be able to interpret the data better. The second thing that we have to understand is the effect of occupancy. The charging stations in Amsterdam, they all come with two sockets. So a single station can charge two vehicles simultaneously. And the current limitations that I showed in the Flexpower profile, they apply station level. So that means that if two vehicles are connected simultaneously, they sometimes have to share this current. And we've learned from the data that this sharing of current actually occurs when the total number of connected phases exceeds 3. So if it's 3 or below, then the station can solve it internally by assigning a certain phase to one connector and another phase to another connector. But as soon as the total number of connected phases is more than 3, it reduces the current on both sockets. And you can see a shift in power distributions, meaning that the vehicle will actually charge slower. And the last interesting thing that we have to think about is actually what is the lowest power that we can offer. So during the evening limitations, the current station level current limitation is 8 ampere. But if two vehicles are connected simultaneously, they would have to share this 8 ampere, leading to 4 ampere per socket. But this is actually too low. This is lower than the protocols allow for. So instead of providing 4 ampere per socket, we alternatingly switch between 8 ampere on socket 1 and 0 on the other one, and the other way around. So the car is alternatingly charging and not charging. So I just want to show you this to illustrate how complicated it is if you want to implement such a strategy in a real world, where you have to consider paying users that are dependent on your solutions because for their energy. So you have to think about all possible combinations of factors and circumstances. So now that we understand the data, we can start to draw conclusions. And the first result that I would like to present to you is the average power for a charging session over the course of the day. It's presented independently for the different vehicle categories, and you can see why, because the behavior is very, very different. The 3 categories that are internally limited to 16 ampere, they can actually not profit from the increased current levels during off-peak hours. So you can actually see in red, you can see the Flexpower, and on blue, you can see the reference lines, that they do not really have an advantage. But they do have a disadvantage during the evening hours because the current is limited. The other 2 categories that are able to charge at higher current levels, they immediately profit during off-peak hours, but are still limited during the evening hours. So this is actually how the smart charging strategy translates to effective charging power during a specific transaction. And if we then look at the contribution that a charging station has on the electricity grid over the course of the day, we can see that the Flexpower and the reference groups have comparable contributions to the grid, but that during the evening hours that the EV contribution is significantly lower, which of course is what we expect because we only allow very slow charging. But this comes at a price, because after limitations are lifted, we can see an even higher peak occur, a rebound peak, where the energy demand that has been building up is met at an accelerated rate. But luckily, this doesn't have to be a problem, because this peak occurs around after 9 p.m. and the grid has already sufficient room to accommodate this by this time. And if we then look at one of the KPIs for the SEEV4-City project, avoided grid investments, we can conclude that the avoided peak load for a charging station in Amsterdam is 1.2 kilowatts during peak conditions. So that is actually what we can realize by applying this strategy. But what are the effects on the user? So the grid has an advantage. It can be, the peak load can be alleviated. But what about the users? So in order to investigate the effect on the users, we look at the effective charging power that it experiences during a charging session. And this is an example for one of the categories, the category for one phase 32 ampere charging. And as you can see here in this power distribution, on reference stations, this category charges at approximately 3.7 kilowatts, which many of you will recognize as 16 ampere charging. But on Flexpower, this vehicle has some higher powers, but also some lower powers which are present. So we can interpret this as two shifts. We can interpret it as a negative shift during limitation hours and a positive shift during off-peak hours. And if we translate these shifts into percentages, we can make this table where we actually, for each vehicle category, can show the negative, the neutral, and the positive contribution of Flexpower to the users. And the conclusion is that approximately between 10 and 20% of the sessions that have not finished charging upon disconnection are negatively influenced. But luckily, most sessions complete charging well within the connection time. And for users, that means that whether or not the charging was a bit faster or a bit slower, it doesn't really matter, because by the time the car is picked up, it's full. So if we take that into account, then we can conclude that the negative impact of Flexpower is less than 10% for users. Then lastly, what is the impact on the overlap with sustainable energy production? As we saw earlier, that the profile is actually different during the day depending on the weather conditions. There's a higher current available for charging when there are sunny conditions. But if we compare these two lines with each other, it's actually visible that the impact is very small. So that means that a larger energy supply is not really does not really have an impact if the energy demand is not higher. So if people are not capable, either by the technical characteristics of their vehicle, or by the fact that the energy demand is already satisfied, then increasing your supply will actually not do a lot. So that is the conclusion of our difference during the day. So that leads me to the main conclusions and outlook of the project. The first conclusion is that charging is very dependent on the local circumstances of the charging station, and that's mainly the occupancy and also the technical characteristics of the connected vehicle. We are able to suppress the load of a charging station representing the EV contribution to the grid during a designated time window with minimal user impact. So that's a very positive conclusion, that we actually have a possibility to tune this without having too large of an impact on the users, and attracting higher energy consumption during the day to facilitate a better overlap with renewable energy production really requires extra incentives for users, because right now the demand is simply too low to get significant consumption during the day. Then some outlook points to make this results even better is we would like to integrate grid measurements into our profiles so that we can do better than the current one-size-fits-all solution. So right now, every station in Amsterdam has the same profile, but it would be nice to calibrate this depending on how much room is there still on that specific energy grid, or what is the exact timing of the peak in energy demand at that location, which might be quite different depending on the location in the city. And the second improvement would be real-time feedback on the profiles. So you can, for example, impose a current limit not only on a single station, but on a cluster of stations around a certain transformer, so that the first user that connects get the full power, but as soon as a second or a third user connects, that the limitations are gradually applied so that the total load is always kept below a certain threshold. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to questions.
Good, thank you, Pieter. Very nice insights of the Amsterdam project. We have some questions showing up. We will take a few of them. We were a bit running out of time, so first question that is standing there for a while is what regulations should be promoted, possibly on European level, to the favor of development of V2G? Any opinion of your side?
Yeah, so the Flexpower actually is not about V2G at all. This is not a part of the project. But what an interesting point is to make about regulations that are very relevant for us is actually for grid operators. They are bound by legislation very much at the moment. So, for example, if you request a certain connection, 3 times 25 amperes, they are legally bound to deliver this within a certain time for a certain price. But if we look at the graph for household consumption, this was in the Netherlands, this is around in the order of 1 kilowatt. But if you start using the same connection, which they are legally obliged to offer for the same price for EV charging, then you can suddenly have 10-fold higher electricity load. So the grid operator really needs different tariffs for different kinds of connections to be able to facilitate this.
Okay, another question here, specifically for Amsterdam. It's nice that you can reduce peak power by 1.2 kilowatts per charger, but how far away are some of Amsterdam's distribution grid circuits from EV cost overloads?
So that really depends. Amsterdam is a very large city. Some of it's 400 or older, 400 years old or older, and some of it is fairly new. At the moment, there is not a big problem. That's the reason that we're doing the project now and not in 10 years. But it is clear that there are many grids that are reaching the limits of their capacity, especially if we would have to, for example, increase the number of charging stations by a factor of 10. Especially because these charging stations have such a heavy load compared to an average household. Right now, maybe a grid has 1, maximum 2 chargers per grid. But as soon as that increases to 4 or 5, you have to accommodate for the possibility that an advanced full electric vehicle connects at all those 5s at the same time. And then you will really need these kinds of solutions to be able to suppress this peak.
Okay, good. One last question about data, of course. The city of Amsterdam has very useful data which could be used for researchers, policymakers, and practical cases. Can the data holder make this data set open source, which would greatly help research and development?
Yeah, that's
maybe.
Unfortunately, it's not in my power to do this, but it's a very relevant point. And actually we are in the process of because it's very privacy sensitive data, because you can really follow vehicles around the city. But we are in the process as a University of Applied Sciences to publish data sets with aggregated results or with anonymized results to facilitate exactly in this demand that the questionnaire has as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your nice presentation. We will continue with a small and short break with some questions towards our audience. We'll take over the screen again. So here we go. So just a small introduction about EAFO. Maybe some people are very curious about numbers about electric vehicles. So actually we have good news if we look at these numbers of EAFO, which is the European Alternative Fuel Observatory. So we have seen a very nice peak of new registrations in 2019. But if you look for 2020, that we see that we are very, very along with this electrification of the fleet. We see also that charging points are drastically going higher up each year, and even for 2020 we see already a nice peak coming up. So I'm also a bit curious which transport mode that you are using. I want to see if you drive electric, if you're driving hybrid. Maybe your main transport mode is walking or biking. And maybe some people are just staying at home, or we have a lockdown. So maybe you should not focus on this one. This lockdown was actually also the result that we are not holding this meeting in Oslo, which was the goal, together with the Nordic EV Summit. This is unfortunately postponed during the pandemic. I have to get some inputs of your transportation mode. I will stop the poll from here and share the results. So 17% is driving an electric vehicle. So those people of this 70%, oops, I'm going too fast here. 70% of these people are in the statistics of EAFO. They are in those left sides. I still see that for a lot of people still driving internal combustion engine. Shame on you, shame on you. This should be changing very fast. No, nevertheless, we need all the time to get there. It's not done at once. Thank you for contributing. There is a survey going on EV pricing transparency. This is very linked of the material that we are handling now and accessibility of charging points in Europe. I cannot share the link on this online webinar, but please write it down. This survey is done for the EAFO, and it's a very short survey to get some insights from your side. Meanwhile, I hope our next speaker is ready. He's very far away from us.
Hi, Philip. Yep.
Yes, are you there?
Good. Yes.
You're ready to take over the screen?
Good. If you can stop sharing from your side.
Yeah. I'll still repeat once that please post your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. We have quite some questions, so unfortunately we're not able to handle them all. So, Ethan, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Philip. Yeah, great to be sharing the online platform with the rest of the world, I guess, in today's times. The circumstances are also allowing us to join in into these sessions and share insights across the world. By way of introduction, I'm Pieter Palmer from the National Uyilo e-mobility program in South Africa that's been working since 2013 around enabling, facilitating, and mobilizing electric mobility. While not directly participating in the SEEV4-Cities project, we also had an opportunity to share insights around this exciting topic of vehicle-to-grid and smart charging. So today I'll just be sharing some insights around our activities in South Africa and also for developing country in the context. You know, what's relative, obviously within European markets and things like that, but really what we see is the landscape progression as per the slides, moving from the predominant energy landscape on the left, moving into the right, where we see a different range of bulk energy generation coming into play within that, which is supporting the diversification in that and decarbonization within that context. The transmission also changing and distribution network also changing. It's interesting that we're seeing storage come into that role as well. And then obviously the is really on the end user platform. And that's where we're seeing rooftop solar, energy storage within that, demand side response, grids, and all electric transportation, which is featuring within that ecosystem. What's important in relative to today's topic as well, we see, especially within transportation. So electric vehicle technology of V2G, vehicle to grid, or V2X as a whole. We certainly see the opportunity of electric vehicles contributing within that space where traditional transport systems were decoupled from the energy sector in that context. So I think this is what is important to see. Along the technology side, the red lines also indicate the data flow within that. Obviously, the role as central aggregation that we see come into play around that. And that's really what it comes down to, I think, within all the topics of smart vehicle to grid, it's all relying on a communication network which needs to be real and supportive of the nature itself. I think on the topic of smart charging, it's been profiled in the various communication networks. Here in the case of the Open Smart Charging Protocol, it's been the developments within what started out as OCPP has moved on to the various progressions in this. There's been multiple revisions on that context. So this is the one possibility where we see smart charging coming into play. Are we leveraging on the capability of the hardware itself, and then also the capability of the backend systems as well as the aggregator and utility to be able to provide this service. So that's one focus area and potential smart charging. But if we expand on that, you know, looking at the balance of supply and demand, the use case of batteries and specifically lithium-ion batteries, and can be expanded to any other case of lithium-ion batteries. The wide range of inclusion of batteries to the energy ecosystem, specifically on grid services, behind the meter services, and off-grid applications within it. And I think within the context of grid strengthening and developing countries, this is where we see the opportunity of the technologies of solar as well as storage and renewables being coupled to strengthen the grid and support the smart grid networks, the smart ecosystem, and the various systems that we see coming into play. And that really extends on the topic of electric vehicles, essentially being mobile batteries. This is where we leverage the opportunity of vehicle to grid in that nature as well. So it's important to see that the role of smart charging is supported not only from a communication network, but then also supported at TSO, DSO, but as well as the end grid side benefit of utilizing energy storage opportunities within that context. This acts as a buffer and then supports the balance of the demand versus against the supply. And speaking of smart charging, that's what comes into it. So looking at V2X, vehicle to everything, well classified within Shademo. And that really extends across within the energy landscape of vehicle to load, typically the ability of an EV providing AC voltage to at a remote location to power any typical home appliance. Then you've got vehicle to home, so that's in the direct home environment where the EV will substitute power to the direct household itself, and vehicle to building in the same nature, the combination of a cluster of EVs supporting the building network directly into a building or multiple network of buildings. And then we're seeing vehicle to grid, which is the larger integration of electric vehicles, fleet of electric vehicles supporting ancillary services to the grid. So that's typically what is being currently supported and within commercial application, supported within the current protocol of SHDEMO. Expanding on that, I think as the pioneers within the technology and deployment into the market, there's a number of projects that are showcased across the world. These are not all of them, but certainly some. And our project that I'll be speaking on today, just touching on that within South Africa, on our specific activities on that context. So some of the VTL project, well, one of the projects specifically on vehicle to load has been showcasing the opportunity and opportunity within developing countries in terms of blackouts, and the opportunity to utilize EVs on this context. So basically an appliance that's not available to not only charge the vehicle, but also to support energy provision from an electric vehicle in the case of a blackout or remote power in that context. Our specific smart grid project, specifically on smart charging and looking at grid strengthening, have been looking at the left side, as we highlighted earlier. The traditional direct grid connection offers a low optimization in terms of low carbon inputs of energy towards that, as well as optimization. However, if we move to the right-hand side, we see the opportunity of inclusion of renewables, stationary storage, and utilizing the grid when it's available, when it's not constrained. I think the focus is beyond the protocols, as well as highlighted earlier, is focusing on energy management at the local level. And that's been the directive of our project, focus more so on energy resilience, having a multi-energy input, providing high optimization, as well as in energy efficiency. So it's focusing on the microgrid level for grid stabilization, renewable energy integration, and optimization for peak shifting, as well as ancillary services such as vehicle frequency regulation through V2G. That's the system and the project deployed. PV array that's providing the renewable input, energy input. Storage is not additional essentially storage. We've kept the focus to the EV ecosystem, and we've included second life EV batteries within that ecosystem. It currently includes a multiple distribution network of EV chargers, as well as vehicle to grid within that context. And I think what the energy management system in this context is focused towards is really at a local level, beyond the typical derating of charges from a national control level, is really managing at a local level, and the opportunity of energy management in this context and utilizing storage plus renewables to really provide smart charging. The incorporation of the system from a software perspective as hardware perspective provides the resilience on the energy side to provide at most 100% EV charging at all possibilities, and that's latching on to smart charging. So together with the software and the hardware system implemented, this is the strategy of the system implemented on that. So it includes a number of OEMs participating within that, a number of service providers within that on the hardware, software side, and really building on energy resilience within that context and bringing in smart energy into that, not only looking from the software side, but the ability of managing supply side management, demand side management, and optimization for the end consumer, which is your EV driver, to provide a decarbonized energy charge, less impact on the grid, and provide energy resilience through energy management. So that's the inputs from our side. We're happy to share further details on that, but certainly, increasing the scope of smart charging, renewable energy integration, as well as V2G, what that really encompasses, and building the ecosystem currently in South Africa and expanding as a showcase for developing countries.
Good, thank you very much. Thank you for the insights. Maybe there is some questions popping up. I will take a look at them. So it's maybe a bit difficult because you have your insights, of course, of South Africa. The questions which I see are sometimes more related to European, but we'll give it a try. If you don't have the answer, no problem, of course. In the presentation, there is a question of key stakeholders' benefits. Their TSO, DSO, EV owner, building owner, etc. are mentioned. Where are the energy service suppliers situated in this concept?
Yeah, so I think the model can be applicable from an energy management perspective, either at utility level, municipality level, or as a local at the local level. I think we're seeing smart charging hubs coming into play right now all over the world, and that's really where it comes down to is energy optimization at the grid edge and providing that stabilization. I think one of the early questions we're also looking at on the question of stationary batteries in terms of second life batteries, and certainly that's what's highlighted within this project, the ability of the circular economy, inclusion of the waste stream of EV batteries into building energy resilience and incorporating, managing the demand side for EV charging in that context.
Looking for the next question. Are there challenges with collecting stakeholders to participate? Who do you see to be the largest beneficiaries?
Yeah, so I think from a stakeholder point of view, obviously the OEMs are introducing their products into the market, and they would want to secure a seamless customer experience within that framework. So certainly they are the providers within that, well, the stakeholder within that. The hardware side, you're looking at the hardware from the chargers and capabilities, both from unidirectional as well as bidirectional capabilities, and then the back-end systems as well, supporting that, and the various role plays within it. So really it speaks to multi-stakeholders, and that's the objective of the program, bringing multi-stakeholders together and trying to improve the customer experience for the market.
Okay, good. Thank you so far. It was great to have you from the other side of the world. Please stay with us. Maybe you have some questions later on. I hope our next speaker is ready. Now we go to the north side of the globe. Martin, welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you see my presentation coming up now?
Yes, it's up and running.
That's very good. Thank you very much, Philip, for the introduction. Yes, I'm based in Copenhagen, and I've been working as a consultant in electric vehicles for more than 20 years. The first 10 years at the airport in Copenhagen, electrifying all the equipment at the airport. And the last many years, I've been a consultant in electric vehicles, now focusing more on buses and trucks and some of the smart charging features and vehicle to grid. But what is most important in today is my experience for more than 3 years working for Nuvi, the aggregator here in Copenhagen, at the first startup. As you can see in the picture, I like driving all sorts of electric vehicles and also long distance. So I have a lot of practical experience in general with operating fleets and electric vehicles. But what is important today is the experience I had when I was an operating manager for Nuvi. That started 4 years ago. And that was in the time when the Parker project was running. And the first customer was Flexpower Forsyning. Many of you might have heard about this before. And this was a very interesting project. We installed 10 chargers in this first location. The chargers were the manufacturers from Portugal called Magnum Cap. And as you might be able to see on the picture, they were the first generation and they were very large. This was part of the interesting experience. I'm not going to go into details about the Parker project. There was a very, very nice final report made beginning of last year. I have a link to that, and you can Google that and read all the details if you're interested. But I'm here to talk about the practical experience in general. We've heard from the first speaker that it's important for vehicle to grid that the customer is satisfied. Does the customer get benefit from vehicle to grid compared to smart charging? So this is something I've been studying quite a bit and been very happy to engage with the customers about. And one very interesting finding was another project in Denmark on the island of Bornholm called EcoGrid project. They were aggregating electric heat pumps at people's private homes. So they could simply switch off the heat pump and then switch it on again when the temperature got down to an uncomfortable level. And this was important because each family has a different level when it gets too cold, gets uncomfortable. So they were able to aggregate that. And one of their main findings when they had their final conference presenting all this was that it is quite difficult to sign up the first customers for a service like this, because do people really believe, do they really trust that they will actually switch on the heat pump again when the house starts to get cold? So they needed to sign up just a few people in the beginning to show that it actually works and it's a reliable service they have. So that was some of the very interesting findings about this. And this is exactly the same with vehicle to grid, because a lot of people that don't drive an EV, we saw earlier on that quite a few people here in this conference also drives petrol and diesel cars. So they feel uncomfortable just by charging a car. That's a big challenge for many people that are not used to it. That's for sure, and still is. So for many people, it's also really, really hard to understand that you can actually take power out of the battery. How can I make sure that the car is charged on a satisfied level next morning and stuff like that? So there's a lot of similarities for the heat pump case. So here I am just presenting a few basic things that made Nuvi's operations really, really good and made the customer happy and after a while believe that this actually works. So one of the things is obviously that you need to be able to set the state of charge you need. For instance, next morning at 7 a.m. when you want to drive, many can live with 80% on the battery. They don't need to go to 100 maybe if they don't have a very busy day. So you need to be able to set that on an individual basis for each of the cars in the fleet or your private car at home. But you also need to be capable of setting a minimum level on the battery, just like the heat pump case. When does it get cold in your flat? You also need to have a minimum level on your battery, because if it's a private car, you need to be capable of taking your kids to the emergency room or whatever you need in your private life. So this minimum level is very important. If the car comes back with a lower state of charge than the minimum level, it simply needs to charge as fast as possible to the minimum level and don't go below that level all day and all night when it's in vehicle to grid mode. And that way you feel very sure that you can actually use the car if you suddenly need to on an unexpected trip. But you also need to be capable of starting a charge if you suddenly get an unexpected trip later in the evening, for instance. Then you must be capable of starting it remotely on an app or a web service or something like that. So you feel that you are in control and you can see the current status on your car all the time. In this way, when this actually works, and if you have these minimum requirements for your service, vehicle to grid is actually working very well. But again, you can't just deploy a lot of chargers in the first place. You need to have a reliable base of customers that can actually show, so you can show that it works and they feel comfortable, and from there on you can build your network of vehicle to grid chargers. And then, apart from the very interesting project we had with the Danish Technical University and Nissan, Mitsubishi, and other partners in the Parker project, we had a lot of visitors from all around the world. And at some point, I started to question people that were coming, because why are you traveling all around the world just to see these operations here in Denmark? By the way, one of the very nice visitors was Hidden Palmer, just speaking before. But I started questioning them to see why they were so interested in vehicle-to-grid. And it turned out that a lot of people were coming not to see what kind of TSO services, frequency regulation, and other things you can do, but how could this support a larger uptake of electrification in the local grid, in the distribution grid, like electric vehicles, of course, and also heat pumps. Because in a lot of countries, a lot of cities, people see the local grid as the big challenge in this electrification. And obviously, it's very expensive to upgrade the local grid in many places. We are very fortunate in Denmark to have a very strong grid here. So this is not top of our minds, although we have some projects with different kind of DSO services that you can do with vehicle-to-grid, but we had to focus on the TSO services because that's where you can make money directly in Denmark. And then there was also a lot of questions about the chargers. I saw just one question before about the charger price. In the beginning, the price for vehicle-to-grid charger were very, very high compared to a normal smart charger. It was like factor 5 or 7. The prices has come down now, but they are still more expensive as it is normally DC chargers, and they will always be more expensive. But fortunately, we see a lot of more other hardware manufacturers now coming up with very nice and very small DC vehicle-to-grid chargers. That's very, very nice and very important for the development of vehicle-to-grid. So a lot of interest, that's for sure, and still is. I can see in the question and answer section that there's still a lot of interest about this subject.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Martin. Very different insights of a colder continent.
Yes, exactly. So that's very good. Let me see with some questions arise from this.
Yeah, I saw some questions popping up. We'll start with the first one. Isn't the issue that in getting a viable business model for vehicle-to-grid, etc., is that the load on the electricity networks need to be significant to drive the economics?
So the load needs to be significant, or how do I understand that question?
What I understood, when do we gonna switch to vehicle-to-grid purposes? Where is the balance when the grid is overloaded? Okay.
Yeah, so this is obviously a very, very complicated question to ask because as I said, there are some services that you can earn money on the higher level, on the TSO level right now, especially in Denmark. It's quite well paid, but the DSO services, you need to have quite a large amount of vehicle-to-grid charges in an area before you can do DSO services. And the DSO services are not defined yet in many places, so it's not a market you can just tap into. You more or less need to define your market yourself, so this is absolutely a challenge. Yeah. And very complicated to answer, unfortunately.
I see some questions popping up about induction charging. So induction,
very important.
Also important. You see this showing up a bit in pilot project as well. Any experience from your sides?
This is something I've been looking into, but the thing with vehicle-to-grid is that you need to convert from AC to DC all the time, which means there is a power loss already. And this is quite important that this power loss is as small as possible, because if you do frequency regulation, you do it in a lot of hours. So the energy loss is important. So if the induction charger is losing more energy than what should we say, a normal charger, then this is very bad for the business case. But in case it doesn't lose more energy, it would be very fine, and of course a lot more easy than plugging in every time, especially for fleets.
Okay, good, thank you. I think the most relevant questions to you are handled. Thank you for your contribution so far. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Maybe there's more questions popping up at the end of the webinar for all speakers together. So thank you, Martin. And now we're gonna go to AV. We are back to Amsterdam. It seems that Amsterdam is the headquarters of charging opportunities of vehicle to grid cases.
There's certainly a lot of action happening in Amsterdam. Philippe, can you see me?
I see you, and you can take over the screen if everything works fine.
Sure. Let me just share my presentation here.
Yes.
And
it's there.
Here we go.
If you're ready, go ahead.
Sure. Great. So thanks, Philippe. Thanks to the other panelists and the attendees. My name is Ghanim. I work at Resourcefully. And today I'd like to talk to you about a fairly similar project to SEEV4-City called Clean Mobile Energy, part of the Interreg Northwest Europe program. So just quickly over us, Resourcefully, we're an energy transition consultancy, as Philippe said, based in Amsterdam. We focus on the integration of local renewable energy and e-mobility, as well as other loads, other electricity demand coming from electrification in the cities as part of the energy transition. And we were involved in leading the proposal as well as the project management for the SEEV4-City project, as you saw Hugo in the last session of this webinar, and as well as now assisting the lead partner in this Clean Mobile Energy project for the content and project management. So I'd like to talk about the Clean Mobile Energy project. This is looking at integrating smart charging into a broader energy system context. So as we know, across Europe, we see cities investing heavily in local renewable energy, in clean mobility, and the charging infrastructure for these for these EVs. But the renewable energy production and consumption don't always coincide on the same time. So we get peaks in energy production when there's little demand, and a lot of consumption when there's little local clean energy production, as we've seen from the other speakers as well. So this leads to a far from optimized grid utilization, and in places such as Amsterdam or other sections of older cities where perhaps the grid might not be as strong as, say, in Denmark, this leads to a problem. So to tackle this problem, the Clean Energy Project, which is led by the municipality of Arnhem in the Netherlands, we're working to implement an integrated, interoperable energy management system to optimize the energy situation. And let me talk to you about what we mean by that. So we look at developing an integrated energy management system, or IEMS as we call it, which will connect to multiple energy devices of various types, both producing and consuming electricity, to ensure an optimal situation. And this involves being able to forecast, to monitor, and to also do intervention activities controlled by the system. So this IEMS will guide the system to achieve minimal carbon emissions by maximizing self-sufficiency or consumption of local renewable energy. So we have 4 EU cities involved in the project. Of course, London and Nottingham, I suppose, officially left at this point into the EU. It's still part of the project, happily. So we're developing city pilots in these 4 cities, so Arnhem, Nottingham, London, as well as Schwäbisch Gmünd in Germany. And we also get contribution from other partners, as well as funding from Interreg Northwest Europe. At each city pilot, it represents a different urban scale and situation where we're implementing this IEMS energy management system in. And this ranges from a small town such as Schwäbisch Gmünd to the large metropolis like London. In terms of the concept is to build a modular energy management system that can be used in very different city applications. So for example, in Arnhem, we have a large solar farm of 10 to 12 megawatts, which is currently being built with a large stationary battery storage system, an electrified cruise ship maintenance harbor, as well as connecting to all of the public EV chargers in the city, operated by Allego. In Nottingham, solar PV systems are installed on a council maintenance vehicle depot. There's a couple buildings in this depot site, together with a battery storage system, vehicle-to-grid chargers, and vehicle-to-grid enabled electric vans, which the maintenance personnel will use. And then in London, the IMS is implemented at the Metropolitan Transport Agency's train depot. So this is a very large train maintenance depot in the middle of London, which connects the rooftop solar PV system, battery storage, electric maintenance vehicles, and potentially also to the private grid of Transport for London. And lastly, in Schwäbisch Gmünd, the solar PV is connected to a universal e-bike charging station, which serves e-bikes as well as cargo bikes for last mile delivery services. So very different applications, very different situations, but with one energy management system. So what is similar for all cities is that in each city, they're striving towards more solar energy, more e-mobility, more electrification in terms of electric heating and so on. And without smart management, this could, as we talked, lead to dangerous peaks in the power grid. And so, for example, as you see in this image here for the business as usual or BAU scenario, very simply, most electric vehicle users connect their vehicle in the evening when they arrive at home. So in the coming years, we can expect the existing evening electricity demand peak in residential areas to be significantly increased through this, and as well as electric heating when everybody comes home. So this is where smart management of the vehicle charging and also through V2G and battery storage systems can help stabilize the grid and avoid excessive grid reinforcement costs.
Thank you.
To enable this IMS, it's important that there is real-time data access to the different systems, ranging from a building management system to battery management system, EV charging systems, as well as the solar plant. So the open data exchange and communication standards are very critical in enabling such an EMS to function. And just quickly zooming into the Arnhem City pilot case, here are the components. We've got a very large solar PV system, as I spoke, a storage, electric harbor, as well as all the EVs, which the IMS will need to connect to. Excuse me. And we have done an analysis on the EV charging session data from Allego. These are all of the public charging stations in the city of Arnhem, about 120,000 sessions from 2016 onwards till 2019. And you can see here the different distributions throughout the week. To keep it short, we've done a clustering process to identify different user groups from these sessions. So some work time sessions are commuters coming into work. Pillow sessions, they see in light blue, are people coming home from work and then charging their cars for the overnight. And what we have done from this is to build a model of these charging sessions to be able to then model what the, on a desktop study level, what is the benefits of smart charging to the city of Arnhem. As we see here, a decreasing the peak by having more commuters charging within the solar peak and spreading out the evening charges over the nights. And just to end on one critical note here about who controls the system. So in the pilots such as Nottingham, where it is in the municipalities or the council's maintenance depot, everything is behind the meter, and there's one controller for the system. However, in Arnhem's case, it's a multi-stakeholder system. So it's not just one stakeholder's interest we need to keep in mind. There is the solar generator who wants to sell as much or all of their power at the highest price in order to generate the revenue. There is the municipality of Arnhem who owns the battery system and who wants to operate it in the most cost-efficient and carbon emission reducing manner. And there's Allego, the charging point operator in the city, who of course wants to be able to take care of the needs of their users while generating a profit and running these charging points. So one of the biggest issues we've come across is, in such a multi-stakeholder system, who controls it and who takes responsibility for the legal and financial consequences of such control. So such a controller requires real-time access to either control or suggest actions for participating flexible components. So this could be smart charging or delayed charging with the EVs, or controlling the battery storage system. It needs to be able to access flexibility markets with the DSO and TSO to process the financial transactions with each of the participants, while balancing the needs of all of these participants. So this is something that we're closely looking at right now. Out of our procurement process, we've engaged a company called Open Remote to develop the IEMS and work with each of these stakeholders in all of the city pilots, and that's what we're doing currently. So this project runs until 2022, and currently we're putting all the components in place to be able to then test this energy management system that we're developing as we speak. So just to conclude from now, we see that the best way to achieve this energy transition is by integrating local renewable energy generation with other flexible and local demands through an energy management system, but we do come across the issue of interoperability. So this is that it can work with various types of devices. So open data and communication is of course essential to be able to scale, to have a open source modular based architecture for the system is thus very important to enable the scalability we see, as well as, yes, technical and financial control and responsibility for the system, to be able to define that when you are going to build and implement such a system is very crucial to enable the operation of the system. So I will end over there to try not to take too much time. If you have any questions, I'd like to answer them right now. If not, feel free to contact us. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, a very different insights on another project approach. I have very little questions for you. We'll take them. Take a look at them immediately. Hope they are relevant for you. When it's about interoperability across platforms, what are your points of view? How easy is it?
So on that, we are currently working. So for example, in Arnhem, we are working with the IEMS developer, Open Remote, with the local stakeholder group. So for example, with the battery storage system, working with them to open up an API. So basically it gets into a technical story of being able to access every system. So open up an API connection to each other's systems with the charging point operator Allego. We are looking at what communication standards they're using for their charging points. So in this case, OCPP, and to look at if they can implement OCPP 2.0, which enables smart charging signals to be sent. So that's something that we're looking at as well. So it really depends on the stakeholder and the device. If they have a more open data system, it makes it easier, but it's really case by case.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna leave it from here to get in time with our last speaker. Thank you, Avi.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Jan Winkler. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen.
Are you able to take over from screen? I'm really happy that it goes so smoothly this time, switching from Amsterdam, Central Europe to the north to the south of the globe.
Does it work? Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Indeed, see the screen.
Okay, great. Then I'll start. Hello, everyone. My name is Jan Winkler. I work for the Mobility House, a company that is focused on making maximum use out of EV batteries at any point in time, so that the customer value out of the EV battery is more than just using it for driving around in the car. We have been involved in 2 SEEV4-City projects, both at the Johan Cruyff Arena in Amsterdam, and I presented those during the last seminar 2 weeks ago. So today, I think that's possible still also to look at. The stream is online, but today I will focus on a slightly different topic. That is the smart charging evolution, the possibilities that smart charging offer today, as well as an outlook where we want to be and where we see the biggest potential then in the future. To start off, I would like to take you on a little journey towards an island. And since this is the last presentation of today, yeah, make yourself comfortable. Imagine an island in the Atlantic Ocean where solar power plants and EV batteries create a zero-emission energy community. And at this point, I would like to share a little video clip.
When we came up with the idea to solve the energy and grid issue on this island with electric cars, people thought we are crazy. And now it's proven that it can work.
I'm very impressed with it. It makes a lot of sense to use the surplus energy in a car when it's left overnight, when you're not using it, to supplement a grid. Essentially take an electricity network off fossil fuels and make it easier to make use of renewables.
With our technology, we bring together 2 industries in disruption. Portasander is the role model how electric cars can solve an energy issue on an island, so we can enable to become 100% renewable on the mobility and the energy sector.
What we have demonstrated here on the island is that the car can really play this role. All this being possible, of course, thanks to the Mobility House technology, who is managing all this information and making sure the grid is balanced.
to many Indonesian islands. It works, and it's gonna be the role model for the future of this planet.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the island of Porto Santo. It's a small island off the coast of Morocco. It belongs to Portugal, and its closest neighboring island is the island of Madeira, which may be more known. We have created, together with Renault and the local electric utility, an ecosystem where we combine vehicle-to-grid technologies, so Renault cars that are customized for this and can charge bidirectionally, with regular smart charging to be in control of and making possible that the charging always happens when electricity is available, plus second life battery storage from Renault batteries, so made of EV batteries that have been driving around before. Integrated that in an ecosystem, put an aggregation platform, a marketplace on top of it that connects it to the utility. And by that, we will be able in the future to lower and ultimately get rid of all carbon emission coming from the electricity side. Right now, the island is relying on diesel generators. It's a very costly scheme because they need to get the diesel to the island from neighboring islands, and they need to get it from the land. And also, so these costs, generation costs, are much higher than if you use the PV and wind power mill they have already installed. But of course, that means you have to make demand and production meet each other. And for this, EV batteries give the perfect resource. The current stage is only the first stage of this, and it will take a bit more time before we can really make the full island carbon neutral, but we have made a first step of getting there. And this is what I would see as the ultimate goal and the future, where we want to be able to realize energy ecosystems that are no longer relying on large central power plants, decentralized production of renewable power, and then are able to buffer that in EV batteries. So this is our long-term vision. We want to be able to create such environments and make energy consumption and production decentralized, local, and intelligently managed. The bad news is, to some extent, that this is a bit of a future scheme. Until these things really become economically viable and the whole market scheme is ready for it, will take some time. So we've heard already V2G chargers are really expensive at the moment. I saw a question regarding which cars can actually do it, and it's only very few, and only the Japanese CHAdeMO system is a standard for it. We hope that there will be a European standard, the CCS, implemented in the course of next year or the year after, but this is still going to take some time before cars really are all capable of doing bidirectional charging. This is the bad news. The very good news is that already today we can do a lot of the things that we will be doing on these island and microgrids today by using smart charging. And these are projects I would like to just sketch briefly that have all been realized. We and other companies have already made these steps, and it starts always with static load management. So you want to, first of all, get in control of the charging. You don't want to be cars charged stupidly. In the first presentation today, we learned that if you plug in a car in the evening, then have it charged full until it's full, and then leave it there for 12 hours and take it for use the next morning or even a couple of days later, this is the worst thing you can do to a car. So you want to be in control, and getting into control starts with a very simple static load management. So you define a maximum value that is the local load that you can give to the cars, to all your chargers that are connected. For instance, you may have a certain, say 100 amps available for charging, you need another 100 amps you have for your building. So you set this value, and then a smart charging algorithm, a software, will make sure that the chargers never take more power than you give them by this smart charging. And I think we've seen enough projects on this part. The next more advanced step that leads to an immediate, much higher value for the customer is the dynamic load management. The two projects I would like to mention is, for instance, in the arena, in Amsterdam, Johan Cruyff Arena, we are doing this, so that when during, of course, they have a very volatile profile. During events, they will need a lot of power for the game. The floodlight need power, and everything in the stadium is running full power. Then there's less power available for chargers. During the rest of the week, there's a lot of power available. So what we do here is always measure the charging power, the load in real time, and then translate it into charging commands and how much power we can distribute to the chargers. The same makes very good sense in bus depots, where we do it, for instance, near Schiphol, where we are able to reduce the maximum power for the bus depot from 5 megawatts down to 1 megawatt, which needs enormous cost savings and less infrastructure and everything around that, by dynamically measuring the load at all times. The next step of the evolution of smart charging would be integrating to a local energy management system. So that's EMS, it's local energy management system. This is something we just heard also in the presentation before, so I'm very glad all these words already came up to these points. You don't necessarily only want to be able to interact with the load and measure the load, but you always might want to know what is going on in the building. If it's a smarter building and it has an energy management system, for instance, there may be a heat pump, and you may make a decision: do you want to reduce the heat pump power or the ventilation power, or do you want to reduce the charging power? So a smart demand-side management system needs to incorporate different things. And then you want to be able to connect smart charging, integrate it into an energy management system that also takes into consideration local energy production and other measures. Next step, grid services, was already mentioned as well. Of course, the grid operators, especially distribution, so the local grid operators, face problems when it comes to voltage control. The TSOs, transmission grid operators, face problems when it comes to frequency control. Both can be catered by EV charging. We are doing, or we have proven that this works already with a bidirectional car that we used to do frequency control in the tenant region. We are doing the same right now in a Hamburg project, where we react to commands from the grid operator to reduce the charging power whenever the local grid is facing trouble and congestion issues. For this, you can get a reduction of costs, or you can generate revenues for the client who's operating the charge points. Finally, smart sourcing means that you can, of course, as soon as we have smart meters in regular operation and the market allows for flexible dynamic tariffs for electricity, even for end customers, that you would be able to define: do I want to charge immediately, or do I charge a bit later when energy prices may be much lower? It could even, like we saw in recent days, go negative. So in the end, you might even get money for the amount of electricity you're charging to your car. All this then leads up to, ultimately, in the near future, hopefully near future, this will depend on R&D activities of the suppliers, and V2G ecosystem where all of this can work together. And the good thing is, you see this curve, all these are cumulative things. So you don't have to make a decision between one or the other. You will want to add them one by one. So definitely you go with the load management system, but then as soon as you can have a situation where you are in a grid, where grid services are important, you also connect to a grid operator and provide him with your services. Connecting this creates more and more value, and the starting point is today, and most of this can already be done today. The step then to make it bidirectional will make it even more fascinating, but it's nothing we should wait for. It's something that we can start working on directly today. And finally, I would like to give a brief info about the product that we are using for this. This is our local control device that you see on the left hand, our local controller. The whole product we call Charge Pallet, and it is something that we install whenever it makes sense. So whenever more than 5 charge points are installed somewhere, for making use of all these applications that I've shown before. The thing that is distinct about our product is that it is fully a local controlled system. So all the intelligence, all the information is within the control unit at the site. It's not relying on information from a cloud. There's no need to connect to the internet. If you have internet distortion, if you have any problem that is coming from the cloud side, this can cause trouble. But here in this case, with our control unit, you're always fully self-reliant on the local information. You're gathering the information from the meter on site, from the energy management system, from the PV inverter, and then make this into a decision on the charging prioritization. And we can, via the cloud, of course, connect to the energy markets and integrate it in the energy and grid markets with all interfaces fully open, so there is no lock-in with hardware, and the possibility to combine whatever hardware you have, different sources of renewable energy, for instance, but also different charging hardware. So no lock-in with a specific charging hardware. You don't have to stick to one supplier or technology. You can combine AC, DC, bidirectional charging, whatever you have within a smart building, and then connect that to the grid and energy markets. That is our proposition, that is our focus, and that is what we're working on to ultimately, ideally in the future, be able to make these island approaches and things that we are learning there already now something that can apply for all energy communities or smart buildings that want to use the most out of EV batteries. Thank you very much, and looking forward for any questions.
Thank you, Jan. I see indeed some questions popping up. So we'll handle them immediately, of course. So they're really addressed to you. So who manufactured the charging station shown in your Porto Santo video? Apparently it was...
that was a customized solution. So it's nothing that you can buy on the market now. It's something that it was produced by a Dutch manufacturer, and they will bring something like that on the market in the course of this year, as far as I know.
Okay. So you mentioned that CCS standard is dominant in Europe, but as per latest reports, there are more CHAdeMO charging stations compared to CCS. Do you think both standards are dominant?
Yeah, what I meant is that the European car manufacturers are focusing on CCS technology, and that they, of course, make a relatively high amount, or manufacture a high amount of the cars that are driving in the European markets. For those, in general, I think there's right now a shift. I read today that Nissan is thinking about withdrawing from the European market altogether and leaving it to Renault focused within the alliance of Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi. I think there is a shift, and well, I think CCS will be the dominant technology in Europe. And yes, so I think if that's the answer, then CCS will dominate in Europe. But of course, today, CHAdeMO is a very important technology as well.
A few more questions, but meanwhile we will also launch the last poll. So we are a bit curious where the job area where you work is relevant for us. Go back to the questions. So Jan, you mentioned that so far only a few models support vehicle to grid. In your opinion, why have more OEMs not adopted this technology, and how could they be encouraged?
Oh, very good question. I think most of them have by now at least put it on their roadmap, and there have been viral videos, for instance, from BMW already for, I think, 2 years that they have it on their R&D roadmap. It seems not to be, well, it's definitely not too easy a task to implement it. And of course, there's fears for the battery lifetime and warranty issues that all the OEMs face. But I think there will be customer demand, hopefully will drive them a bit, and it is just too interesting a technology, especially if you see how many people, for instance, in Germany right now invest, say, 5,000 to 10,000 euros into a home storage device so that they can have a battery in their basement, which they will have to buy for a lot of money, where they in the future could just use the EV battery that they have bought anyhow. I don't see that the manufacturers will come around making V2G possible.
Okay, good. I see some very technical questions. I propose that they technical or more detailed about which local control will be used, etc. I propose that we can address these questions directly to you by email, yep, or other hands. We will share an email address.
Absolutely. One comment. Olivier, I think, made the comment that EVBox is the producer of the charging station. Absolutely correct. It is the Dutch brand, though. NG, the mother company, is French.
Good. Good. Thank you very much, Jan. I think we can close off the webinar here. For today, I'm very pleased with the big number of attendees. You were very numerous. Thank you for your attention. I want to thank all the speakers. Thank you, Ghanim, Pieter, Hayden, Martin, Avi, and Jan. I also look forward to the next webinar. It's about policy learning from SEEV4-City pilots. So indeed, what policies do we need for the future? Please subscribe here for that last webinar on the SEEV4-City region, and I'm happy to meet you in the future. I will at last share the results of our last poll so we can see where you all are coming from. There's a little majority which is coming from private enterprise, and then it's a very differentiated mix. So far, so good. Thank you very much, and keep in touch. Have a nice evening. The sun is shining here. Enjoy. Bye.